Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and this Delta Airlines CEO shuts down this fear-mongering CBS host who's trying to blame Trump for all these airplane crashes. Let's dive in.
I just can't stop looking at this video. I'm sure you are too. And I'm wondering, when you first saw it, number one, Ed, I didn't even know a plane could flip over like that, number one. Number two, it says Delta Airlines. What went through your mind when you saw that picture? And I'm sure you've looked at this video many, many times. I'm a very nervous flyer, as you know, and I'm just so freaked out by this. So when you saw this, what did you think?
Well, it's horrifying. When you look at the video, you can imagine, when I received the text minutes after it happened, hearing that there was a regional jet upside down on an active runway with 80 people on board, how I felt without knowing yet what was transpiring. But the reality is that safety is embedded into our system. Air travel in the United States is the safest form of transportation and travel there is, period. And it's because we train for events like this. And yes, it's amazing the work that our team did up at Endeavor, but that's what we expect out of them because we are prepared for all types of circumstances.
You know, the Trump administration recently fired many employees of the FAA administration. Do those cuts worry you? And do you think that impacts the safety? I know you just said it's the safest way to travel, but after looking at all these mishaps, a lot of people are very nervous. Do these cuts affect you?
The cuts do not affect us, Gayle. I've been in close communication with the Secretary of Transportation. I understand that the cuts at this time are something that are raising questions, but the reality is there's over 50,000 people that work at the FAA, and the cuts, I understand, were 300 people, and they were in non-critical safety functions. The Trump administration has committed to investing deeply in terms of improving the overall technologies that are used in the air traffic control systems and modernizing the skies. They've committed to hiring additional controllers and investigators and safety investigators. So no, I'm not concerned with that at all.
Ed, the administration has also called on Elon Musk to modernize air traffic control. From an airline standpoint, what needs to be done to make the system better? And a quick follow, if I can, what do you say to the people who are nervous getting on airplanes right now?
Well, to the public, I can understand the concerns at the moment. The reality is it's safer than the car ride I took this morning to get to my office. It is the safest form of transportation, period. And it's safe because in our industry, we all focus on safety. And we're a very competitive industry across the U.S. airlines. There's one thing we do not compete on, and that's safety. We all work together. We learn from each other. Every single incident that happens, whether it's reported or not, gets reported back to our teams that we share across the industry. So we learn from each other. And this incident, as terrible as it appears, was something that we'll learn from. They'll make us better.
It's like a bad habit. They cannot stop. The mainstream media cannot stop blaming Trump for literally anything. At this point, if there's an earthquake in the Cascade Range, which we're kind of overdue for a big earthquake out there, they're going to blame the whole thing on Donald Trump when, I'm sorry, this is a force of nature. Oh, which, by the way, the folks up there in the Pacific Northwest, they're not ready for the next incoming earthquake. And so that is a whole idea about how you're supposed to govern properly. They are doing better about that, but what does an earthquake have to do with a plane that wound up upside down in the Denver airport? Well, in one event, you are actually prepared for potential issues. There are runway issues all the time, and these airlines, the CEO is correct. The airlines will work together for safety measures because they know that a plane crash is going to get way more press than, a train crash, because we don't travel on trains here in the United States, and we accept car crashes as just a fact of life. Which, by the way, stay sober, don't get pulled over, okay? Yeesh. And then let's actually look at the numbers. Here are the number of fatalities from car crashes, all right? In the U.S., as a grand total, I think this is back from 2022, there were 42,514. Compare that to airline crashes and airline fatalities. There were 28 accidents. 28 versus over 40,000, okay? So guess which one gets more press? It's going to be the airplane because we have romanticized the idea of flying. Let's be honest, humans have always dreamed of flight. That's why landing on the moon was so monumental. That's why the Wright brothers and their invention. That's why, as a kid, living just a few miles away from the old Bell bomber plant, which is now Lockheed Martin, I had pictures of F-22 Raptors on my walls because that was the coolest thing out there. And guess what? It still is about 30 years later. So that's the power of American ingenuity right there. But ultimately, this CEO is completely correct. Air travel is still safer. And instead of reporting on that, the media is doing the best that they can to trump up anything they can find. And because Donald Trump correctly fired a bunch of useless FAA employees, they are going to blame him for any bad thing that happens. It is an absolutely asinine thing to do. And so it gets even worse when you think about it, because the mainstream media still cares far too much about fear-mongering. That's how they make their money. That is how they are able to stay relevant. If you are glued to your television and looking at the headline, and it's like watching a train wreck, you just can't look away. And because of that, they are able to manipulate modern Americans into believing that Donald Trump is responsible for all these things. It just so happened to coincide with his election. The reality is far, far worse, and it looks worse for just about everyone coming before Donald Trump. The FAA needs to update. It needs some upgrades. The technology is still stuck before Airplane was made, all right? Remember that great comedy, Airplane? Leslie Nielsen, Don't Call Me Shirley? Remember that movie? Yeah, the technology has not changed. Okay, it's bad. And having grown up near some former pilots, they're really worried about all the issues that just keep on piling up, where people aren't upgrading, they aren't updating, and they're still using old call signs that the new generation has no idea what to do. So there have been people kind of raising red flags saying, hey, we've got a problem here, and the chickens are starting to come home to roost on a lot of these problems because we are teaching young Americans not to really pay attention and be specialized in your work. Instead, we keep on churning them out through an education system that makes absolutely no sense. So we're starting to lose some social cohesion. It's making things much worse and much harder to find competent people who can actually work for the FAA, who can actually work up there in those towers, and ultimately, that's the culmination of all these little problems creating these big problems. This is not something that a president can fix overnight. This is going to take some deep changes and some deep cleaning and hopefully some huge upgrades. Having Elon Musk aboard your team, the dude that made the Boring Company, the dude that launched SpaceX, the dude that made Tesla what it is, I kind of want that dude also looking into air travel. Because we love traveling by air in this country. We have a whole culture around it. Heck, our favorite museum, and literally everyone agrees, is the Air and Space Museum out in D.C. They love that place. We love to fly. It is injected deep into our veins because that is sort of the imagination of humanity. And instead of trying to build up that imagination, instead of reporting on what's actually happening, the mainstream media refuses to admit that there have been problems along the way, and they have to pin it on Donald Trump. It is just maddening. It is just maddening to think that that's how low these people will stoop. And this CEO did a fantastic job. And notice that the host that was asking this ridiculous question was cut away from as soon as possible because she asked such an asinine question. That's why they cut to another dude later in the clip. So ultimately, the mainstream media is doing anything they can to stay relevant, to stay in the spotlight. They know their time is short, and thank God it is. And the CEO, on the other hand, is simply doing his job and reminding people that, hey, this is not related to an FAA problem, and we're actually pretty darn good at keeping air travel so freaking safe. So ultimately, this is these plane stories do deserve their time in court. They do deserve investigations, but ultimately, we just live in an era where we can take our phones out and record literally anything, and the numbers simply don't back up the idea that air travel is getting worse. And the media, well, they'll fearmonger as much as they possibly can. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politburo. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.